Welcome to one and all. We're on the 23rd day of the month of Sivan, the third month of the year, 5778. Back to you in the Holy Apple after a week off. Today's subject, put on a couple of seat belts, very important stuff. The title of the class today is Black Hat or Knitted Kipah, Skull Cap. Which one will the Messiah don? Black hat or knitted kippah? Which one will the Messiah don? Okay, in the past, spoke about the time of the revolution during the second temple, time of Bar Kokhba, after the destruction of the second temple. We mentioned that the revolution of the Jewish people continued for 6 years, between the year 129 CE and 135 before the Common Era. So this was going on for 6 years. The Jewish people, through Bar Kokhba, had achieved independence for 4 years. For 4 years, we achieved independence in the Holy Land, with Jerusalem as the capital. Thank you. This revolt was supported by the sages. On the top of the ladder was, of course, Rabbi Akiva, the greatest of the greatest. We also spoke in the past about contradictions within the Rambam, Maimonides. We brought 2 examples, and it seems on one hand that the Maimonides is saying that the redemption of the Jewish people, the era of the Messiah, will come through natural means. Nothing will really change. And in another place we saw that Maimonides tells us a different story, that what happens during this period of redemption and Messiah, there will be tremendous changes. There will be prophets. The leader of the Jewish people will be somebody greater in knowledge than Solomon, and almost the level of Moses in prophecy. So, which one is it? These are things that we discussed in the past, and so let's take it from there. Okay, we're going to give a quick summary of Maimonides' contradictions. We have 7 different places where Maimonides refers to the time of redemption, future redemption, and also the time of Messiah. So number 1, we're going to summarize all of them real quickly. Number 1, our first source is in the Laws of Kings and Wars. It's in chapter 11, verse Law 3. Here we are told by Maimonides that Bar Kokhba is an example to somebody that could be the Messiah, and there's no need for miracles or miraculous stunts that he needs to perform. Second source, Maimonides, the Laws of Repentance, 9th chapter, 2nd law. Here we have, exact opposite, we have what I just mentioned, that in the time the Messiah will bring a person that's greater in wisdom than Solomon, and as great as Moses in prophecy. Third source, a source called Igeret Teiman. This was a little a book that was sent by Maimonides to the Jewish community of Yemen. There were some kinds of difficulties that the community was experiencing. So he sent them this small book called Igeret Teiman. In there he says that wonders and miracles will the Messiah bring in order to prove his position? Once again, we see the obvious contradiction between 1 and 2 and 3. Source number 4, Laws of Kings and Wars. Chapter 12, Law 3. The Messiah will have a special Holy Spirit. He will be able to come up to the Jewish people, the Jewish population, and tell everybody which tribe, which of the 12 tribes he or she is connected to, belongs to. So there's some kind of wondrous amount of, a sixth sense, supernatural, what's called in Hebrew, Ruach HaKodesh, a spiritual understanding, insight. Source number 5, in the Laws of Repentance, chapter 8, Law 7. Maimonides there tells us that in the days of the Messiah and those preceding the Messiah, the days will be like any other days, except for the fact that there will be a Jewish government will return to the Jewish people. Sovereignty will return to the Jewish people. The Jewish people will be independent. Source number 6 for Maimonides is the Laws of Kings and Wars, chapter 12, Law 2. Here, Maimonides states that there is no difference between this world and the coming of the Messiah. Only one difference is that the nations of the world will not rule over the Jewish people. The Jewish people will be independent. Last but not least, we have Maimonides' work on the Mishnah, the oral law, and he has a commentary, preface to the Mishnah. We're talking about the Mishnah of Tractate Sanhedrin, the laws of the Jewish court. The chapter is the chapter called Chelek. Kol Yisrael yesh lehem chelek leolam haba. So the Rambam, before he gets into the actual Mishnah, he tells us various principles. And in there he tells us that in the times of Messiah, the Jewish people will come back to the land of Israel, and also the Jewish people will be independent and they will be sovereign. The ruling will come back. The Jewish people once again rule, and there will be a tremendous leader of the Jewish people, and he will make his government, so to speak, in Zion, in Jerusalem. And the only thing that will be different is the fact that the Jewish people are free. And there will still be poor people, there will be rich people. There will be strong people, and there will be weak people. There will be healthy and sick people. That's what the Rambam says. So we have here 7 sources. Some of them show us a miraculous period of time. Some of us show us that nothing really changes, just Jewish people have returned to the land of Israel, the Jewish people are sovereign, the Jewish people are independent. So we have to understand, we have to make our way through and to understand how do we maneuver through all of these contradictions? What's the right answer? Okay. To understand the contradictions of the Rambam, of Maimonides, we have to go back one step. One step is that we are now understanding that Maimonides receives his understanding of this period from the Talmud, of course, in the Tractate of Brachot, page 34, side B. There we find a dispute between Rabbi Yochanan and Shmuel. And Shmuel tells us that there is no difference between this world and the coming of the Messiah. The only difference will be that the Jewish people will be independent. The nations of the world will not rule over the Jewish people. But aside from that, business as usual. On the other hand, Rabbi Yochanan tells us something very different. He says, if you look at all the prophecies in the books of the prophets, there are tremendous miracles and wonders and super miraculous kinds of living that the prophets saw for the future. And what the prophets saw in the future, this is all happening when the Messiah comes. So whatever you read in the prophets, how great and miraculous it may sound, understand, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that this is the time of Messiah. During the period of Messiah, we will see miraculous and wondrous events. Not like we're accustomed to. The world will not continue as we know it today. That's the dispute. So we understand where Maimonides is coming from. But we haven't solved any of the problems yet. Why? Because sometimes, as is pointed out by many of the Jewish law commentaries on Maimonides, many times we see what we quoted when we summarized Maimonides' opinion on the period of Messiah. Sometimes he goes according to Shmuel. Everything will continue in its natural form as we know it in this world, except the Jewish people will be sovereign and will be independent. And sometimes Maimonides goes according to Rabbi Yochanan, that there will be a miraculous period of time during the coming of Messiah. Okay, so I understand where the source Maimonides turned to. Got it. But we're still here in a dead end. A third angle we have to understand about this period of Bar Kokhba, that there is a dispute in the Tractate of Sanhedrin, page 93, side B. There's a dispute based on a verse in Isaiah 11, chapter 11, verse 3. I will read it straight into English to save time. The Spirit of Hashem will rest upon him, a spirit of wisdom and understanding, a spirit of counsel and strength. We're talking about the Messiah, of course. A spirit of knowledge and fear of God. He will be imbued with a spirit of fear for God and will not need to judge by what his eyes see, nor decide by what his ears hear. On this verse, that God will imbue a certain spirit within the Messiah, and he will judge not with his eyes and not decide by what he hears. On this verse, there is a discrepancy. We have two opinions. Number one, Rava tells us that the Messiah will have a tremendous quality. He will be able to decide judicial cases without listening, without hearing, without seeing various proofs, or, when you walk into courts today, they pull down the screen and they show you all kinds of movies and cameras and footage of what happened. So he doesn't need his eyes to see this. He doesn't need his ears to hear the various sides of the coin. He will decide by this special gift, this miraculous gift that he's received from God. So this is a miraculous. This opinion of Rava, this gels right in with, of course, Rabbi Yochanan, who says that the period of the Messiah will be a supernatural period of time. On the other hand, we have a dispute here. So we have the second opinion is Rabbi Alexandri, Rabbi Alexandri tells us, no, you didn't get the verse correct. The verse is not talking about anything supernatural or miraculous, of some kind of Messiah that's a judge and he's going to decide cases without even hearing the information. No, what we're talking about is Rabbi Alexandri, he translates the verse in a different fashion totally. And he explains it that the Messiah will be a person that has an abundance of good deeds and observes commandments very meticulously, and also is a person that suffers for the Jewish people, for the sake of the Jewish people. He will be burdened down with suffering. So that's, of course, Rabbi Alexandri, his opinion gels right with Shmuel, that the period of the Messianic age is nothing supernatural, no miraculous incident. So this would go according to understanding Bar Kokhba. Bar Kokhba was a tremendous warrior. He was courageous. He took vengeance against the nations of the world. He had no mercy, and he was victorious in his wars. He was a religious person, of course. He listened to the sages, as we've discussed in the past. So he had these things going for him. He was tremendously successful in battle. He brought tremendous victories to the Jewish people, a revolution, a successful one at that, independence. He was religious. He listened to the sages. He followed them. So we see something very natural. Sometimes we meet people that are very, very courageous and tremendous warriors and tremendous heroes. There, in each generation, we have such people. Okay, so just to summarize so far, so we're together here. We brought 7 contradictions within the Rambam, which really 2 contradictions, how the period of Messiah is going to look, natural, supernatural. We brought the source where Maimonides got this information, is the tractate Brachot 34b. There's a dispute between Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan, how the period of Messiah will look, natural, supernatural. And we have the last discrepancy of this verse in Isaiah chapter 11, verse 3. What type of person is the Messiah going to be? Is he going to be able to judge miraculously the Jewish people, the world? Or is it going to be a person that's a natural, he's a righteous person, he's a person with tremendous amount of merit and a suffering for the Jewish people? Okay. Now, let's try to, one after another, let's solve all these contradictions. Right? It looks like a mountain that's hard to overcome, but we will see that it's not hard at all. Everything will come into place. So let the drums roll. Shh, boom. Okay. Number 1. We'll look right now how the commentators looked at the dispute between Rava and Rav Alexandri as far as the verse in Isaiah 11:3, miraculous or natural. So here are the ideas. Number 1, we have a major league commentary on Maimonides. It's called the Kesef Mishneh. Kesef Mishneh writes on the laws of kings and wars, chapter 11, law 3. Here's what he writes. He says that Maimonides follows the law according to the decision of Shmuel, which means we do not need, the Messiah does not need to bring any proof or wondrous miracles, or he does not have to judge in a supernatural fashion. So we see here that according to the commentator, the Kesef Mishneh, Maimonides is going according to Rav Alexander, that the Messiah will be a regular kind of person, not supernatural. Number two, second opinion, is a commentator called the Lechem Mishnah, same source, same chapter, and he says the following: the dispute that we saw in the tractate of Sanhedrin 93 between Rava and Rav Alexandri, does the Messiah have to judge supernatural, or is he going to be a regular kind of person? We have to understand that the law is according to Rav Alexandri. That's the decision that the Lechem Mishnah brings down, that the decision of this Gemara, the correct decision of this Gemara, is according to Rav Alexandri, that the Messiah will be a regular, natural kind of leader for the Jewish people, does not need to judge supernaturally, miraculously, does not. And therefore, the Talmud in the Babylonian Talmud that we mentioned on Tractate of Sanhedrin 93b, this tractate is that tells us that it looks like that Bar Kochva was given a test. People came up to Bar Kochva and they asked him to judge a certain case. When he was not able to judge a certain case, they killed him. It looks like the Jewish people killed Bar Kochva as a false prophet. However, according to what the Lechem Mishnah is saying, no. Who killed Bar Kochva? Who killed Bar Kochva were the Gentiles in the revolution when Beitar was destroyed 65 years after the temple, the second temple, was destroyed. So once again, we have so far two opinions on Maimonides, commentators on Maimonides, that tell us that the dispute between Rava and Rav Alexandri, the law goes according to Rav Alexandri, that the Messiah will be a regular type of person. He does not need to be judged, to be a judge that's a wondrous supernatural. And Bar Kochva was not killed by the Jewish people because of the fact that he was not able to judge a case miraculously. He was killed in the revolt by the Romans. Okay, moving right along. We have now one of the commentators on the Talmud, Einayim LaMishpat, tractate, the same tractate, Sanhedrin 93, side B. This was by Rav Yitzchak Arieli, and here's what he writes. He says, Maimonides, why does Maimonides tell us that Bar Kochva could have been the Messiah, and he doesn't need to be tested? He doesn't have to do anything miraculous. Why? Because we have to understand Maimonides goes according to Jewish law like Rav Alexandri, which means that the Messiah does not have to judge cases supernaturally. That's why the Maimonides brings down the story of Bar Kochva to tell us that he does not have to judge cases supernaturally. Next, we have Maratz Chiyut on page number 206. There's a book that compiles all the writings of Maharatz Chiyut, Rav Tzvi Hirsch Chayut, And here's what he writes, a tremendous lesson. Listen closely what he writes. Page 206. We have to look at a very unusual source in the Talmud. And then he brings down the dispute between Rava and Rav Alexandri as far as the Messiah judging cases either naturally or supernaturally. And he says this is very unusual. This is exactly the opposite of what we learned and what we're taught in the Torah. What are we taught in the Torah? We are taught in the Torah that you are not allowed to judge in such a fashion. When a law comes before anybody, a judge, a rabbi, whoever it might be, we have principles, and the principles are very, very clear. You have to have two witnesses. They have to be kosher witnesses. They have to be interrogated. We have to follow all the laws, not just coming into the courtroom and here comes the judge. Okay, maybe here it goes. Here's the law. Boom, and he hits you with it. No, we have to go through the judicial process. So it's unbelievable. Rav Yehudah here is telling us a great lesson here, a principle, a foundation of Judaism. The Torah will last forever. The Torah is eternal. And the laws of the Torah are also eternal. So if the Torah tells us that in order to prosecute anyone, you need to do 10, 11 different steps, and you have to judge the person, you have to hear both sides, and all the process that we're used to, that will continue. That will continue. And therefore, the words of Rava, that when the times of Messiah comes, we're going to have a supernatural judge who does not need to listen to the case, who does not need to see any of the proofs that we're bringing. This is against the principle and foundations of Torah Judaism. Pretty strict, pretty harsh words over there. Going further, in the commentary on the tractate Sanhedrin, by a book called Yad David, on page 190, Rabbi Yosef David Zinsheim, hope I'm pronouncing that right. Here's what he says. The Yad David, in his commentary on the tractate of Sanhedrin, says an obvious question. How could Rava say what he did? That the Messiah needs to judge supernaturally, and therefore the Jewish people came up, or some kind of a group of Jews came up to Bar Kokhba, and they said, listen, we want to see if you're the true Messiah, because Bar Kokhba, just like Rabbi Akiva said that Bar Kokhba was Messiah, Bar Kokhba said, according to this tractate of Sanhedrin 93b, also Bar Kokhba considered himself to be the Messiah. So a group of Jews came up to him and gave him a test. And when he failed the test, a judicial test, in order to see if he was able to judge the case miraculously without seeing any information, any proofs. So it says they killed him. On this, the Yad David says an unbelievable question. He says, time out on the floor. What's going on over here? If this is true, if the law is according to Rava that you have to judge supernaturally, then I have a question. This revolt of Bar Kokhba was going on for 6 years. What in the world? Were they sleeping? Did they fall asleep at the wheel? Like, oh man, like 4 or 5 years later, oh man, I got some kind of, hangover. Wow, what time is it? Oh, 5 years have passed? Oh, let's give that guy Bar Kokhba a test. I don't understand. You want a license, you don't wait 5 years and they say, okay, I want my license. If you want a license, as soon as you learn how to drive, you fill out the forms and they give you a test. And then, all right after your lessons, you studied, and then you take the test. If you fail, you come right back. Okay, who ever heard of something? He says such an unbelievable, beautiful point. If this is true, that the Messiah has to be some supernatural judge, and that's why they killed Bar Kokhba, not the Romans, the Jews, what in the world did they wait all those years for? To check him out. So this cannot be. Just cannot be. What does it mean? What does Rava mean? Not how we understood it on face value. What Rava is really saying is the following. Listen to the words of the Yad David. The true meaning of Rava, when he says, when it seemed to us to be, we need a supernatural judge who doesn't need to hear any of the information. He doesn't need 2 kosher witnesses. He doesn't have to go through the whole judicial part. No, that's not what we're talking about. Rava was just telling us that when a person comes and claims to be the Messiah, we say, you know what, we're going to give you a chance, and we want to see if you're going to be able to judge according to the laws of Torah, if you will be a kosher judge. You will judge cases and you will come to the Jewish Torah law conclusion. That's what he means. What Rava was talking about, he's not talking about a miraculous judge. He's just talking about that we have to see that this person is right on. All the time, whenever he sits down to judge, he always is able to get to the truth in all cases. He's able to sift through the jive and the baloney and the lies, and we see case after case, he's able to judge according to the law of Torah, and he's able to find the truth. We see that he's able to do that. That's what Rava meant, that this was a sign of a true Messiah that's able to get the cases, and he's able to dissect truth from falsehood, but not something supernatural. Last opinion on this dispute between Messiah judge that's supernatural or that's a regular type of person and a regular type of judge. We have this source. It's called Merkevet HaMishnah on Maimonides. So we're on chapter 11, the laws of kings and wars. Chapter 11, law 3. So the Merkevet HaMishnah is Rabbi Shlomo Machlema on page 353. Here's what he says. He says, very similar to the words of the commentary Yad Ramah, that we didn't understand what Rava meant. It's not supernatural. He wasn't talking about a Messiah that doesn't need to open his eyes and open up his ears and hear the case. No, that's not. He agrees with the Yad Ramah, with Yad David. However, he says a little bit of a different kind of twist. What do we say? What does he say? He says that what do we look for in the Messiah? The Messiah also is a person that's a judge. He's a judicial figure. Right? When the Jewish people in the desert, when they had a problem, they went to Moses. And they went to Moses, and they went to Aaron. So the same thing will be in the time of the Messiah. One of the jobs of the Messiah will be to the person that's judging the Jewish people. So as long as we see that this judge who claims to be the Messiah, he's always right on the mark. His judging is perfect. He does not, God forbid, you hear so many cases today about people that sat in jail for 10 years, 20 years, 15 years, all kinds of amounts, and it turns out to be some kind of mistake. We will see that by the Messiah. Nothing like that will ever happen. There are no mistakes. Okay? He's able to cut through the fog and the smog and get to the truth of the situation. And we see one after another, a case, another case, another case. That is a sign of the true Messiah. But not what we thought. Rava did not mean that we're looking for some kind of supernatural, miraculous judge. Therefore, how do we know that Bar Kokhba was not for real? Because in the end of his days, in the end of the revolution, he kills his uncle. He kills his uncle. His uncle did not do anything. Not only did his uncle not do anything, but his uncle had fasted for 40 years and prayed for 40 years that Hashem should save the Jewish people. He was his best ally. It just happened some Samaritan, not too far away from us, some Samaritan came by and spoke some gossip and falsehood about Bar Kokhba's uncle. And therefore, once the Jewish people saw that Bar Kokhba had killed his uncle, a tremendous righteous man, they knew that this was not righteous, this was not judicial, this was not a fair judicial process here. This was a man that was killed, murdered, and blood all over the hands of Bar Kokhba. That's what Rava meant. We look to see, to make sure that the Messiah, when he judges, he makes no errors. He makes no mistakes. Okay, so we took care of the first dispute between Rava and Rav Alexandri, and we see over unanimously that there is no need for the Messiah to be a judge that judges supernaturally. We saw that from all angles. Okay, the next contradiction that we're going to tackle right here, with God's help. Our second is the dispute between Shmuel and Rav Yochanan. Just to remind ourselves, the dispute goes, according to Shmuel, when the times of the Messiah come, there is no difference between the world as we know it now and the times of Messiah, just that the Jewish people will be independent and sovereign state. Number two, Rabbi Yochanan states, no, that whatever the prophets said, they talked about miraculous types of life that will exist. This is the Messiah's time. This is what will happen in the Messiah's time. We said that Maimonides sometimes goes according to Shmuel, that it will be a natural process, and he sometimes goes and he decides the law according to Rabbi Yochanan, that will be supernatural. So how do we solve these contradicting opinions? So let's get right to it. The first source we have is a book called Bidvar Melech. It was written by Rav Yitzchak, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Ritparat, and page number 21. Page number 21. Says the following. He says that I go according to the commentator of the Lechem Mishnah. Lechem Mishnah, where in Maimonides, the laws of repentance, 8:7, chapter 8, law 7. What is the opinion there that's stated? That there is no contradiction between Shmuel and Rav Yochanan. They both agree. Whoa, how could that be? One says miraculous, one says the ways of the world. No, it could be. What's going on over here? Both agree that there will not be supernatural events at the time of Messiah. So what dispute? We see that there's some kind of dispute there. The dispute is that according to Shmuel, during this time of Messiah, which will be a natural period of time, similar to this world, there will still be, in the world, there will still be wars that are taking place, and there will still be poor people, rich people, healthy people, sick people. And that's according to Shmuel. According to Rav Yochanan says, no, I agree with Shmuel that the period of Messiah will be a natural period of time. However, we will not see wars. Now that's not miraculous. many times there's no wars. It's not such a miracle. A person says, listen, my odds of winning a war here are not so great, so I better keep my mouth shut. We see very interesting, for an example, we see that Iran, after getting whacked a couple of times in the last month or so, why don't they do any retaliation against Israel? Well, it must mean that they're not able to. So we see many times when the bullies come down the block, so it doesn't mean that this is a supernatural, phenomena. Though I heard a great joke yesterday. Remember Sonny and Cher? Yeah? So this was so Sonny, when he was going out with Cher, he told her that when he was in high school, he would always be like, he got his nose broke 6 times. Yeah, Sonny Bono. Remember, he's like a little guy? So, I got you, babe. I got you, babe. So, he said that he got his nose broken 6 times. But he told Cher, he keeps on going back. Why? Because eventually he's going to wear him out. Eventually he's going to tire him out from all their, breaking of his noses. So, sometimes, it's not miraculous. It's just you're wearing the guys out. You're tiring them out. They have no chance against you. It's not that it's a miraculous. So once again, beautiful. The Dvar Melech goes and he gives credit to the Lechem Mishnah, who says that there is no dispute, 99% there is no dispute. The times of Messiah will be a natural process, just like the times of Bar Kokhba. Okay, the only dispute between the two will be surrounding the Jewish people. Will there continue to be poverty? Will there continue to be wars? There will continue to be rich people, sick people, etc. And this is not something, if there's sick people or there's healthy people, this is not a miraculous phenomena. Next. This is brought down by the Holy Gra in his book Aderet Eliyahu, and on the tractate of Brachot, page 34, side B. So what does he tell us? He says very simple. There is no dispute between Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan. Hey, there's no dispute. One says miraculous, one says not miraculous. No, there's no dispute. Why? Because you have to understand the language. You got to understand the linguel, baby. What's the language? So the Gra says that we're talking about 2 different time periods. What Shmuel is talking about, and also Rabbi Yochanan agrees, this natural process, we're talking about the days of the Messiah, of the son of Joseph. The son of Joseph is a physical, as we spoke about many different times, different classes, different angles, that Joseph, who saved the land of Egypt, Joseph, who came and saved and thought up of a 14-year program to save the land of Egypt from famine. He's one of these ministers. He's one of the government. He's the one that builds up Egypt. He represents the physical building up of the Jewish people, whereas the Messiah from David represents the spiritual one that comes after. So first we have a materialistic of bringing ourselves up, bringing the Jewish people back to the land of Israel, having agriculture, building up cities and towns and kibbutzim. It's all materialistic. It's all, make sure that we have a good economy here. It's building the skeleton of the Jewish people, the body of the Jewish people, which has been in a graveyard for 2,000 years since the revolution of Bar Kokhba. So folks, so he says what Shmuel is talking about, that there's going to be a natural process. This also, Rabbi Yochanan agrees, that the time of Messiah, the son of Yosef, That will be a regular time. When Messiah, the King of David, comes in, this will be a miraculous change in the world. So there is no dispute. Another way of looking at it is that there is a dispute here between Shmuel and Rav Yochanan. However, Maimonides decides that he's going to bring down the law according to the Jerusalem Talmud and the writings of the sages, which were also compiled in the land of Israel. Now we have to understand, according to the Babylonian Talmud, a group of Jewish people came to Bar Kokhba and they decided to check if he would be able to supernaturally judge a case, various cases, and when they were not able to, possibly they killed him or they had him killed by the Romans. But on the other hand, according to the Jerusalem Talmud and the words of our sages, which come from the land of Israel, we see a quite opposite picture, that Rabbi Akiva believed that Bar Kokhba was the Messiah. The sages went along with him that he was the Messiah, and there was no supernatural test. It wasn't needed, and it's not a prerequisite. And as we saw, even according to some, it's even against Jewish law to have such a supernatural decision in a judicial case. So we have here, very interesting, from two commentators, they tell us that in many, many instances, when there is a dispute between the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud, the Maimonides goes according to the Jerusalem Talmud and the words of our sages, which the Midrashei Chazal, which were compiled in the land of Israel. And I'm going to bring down two of them. Number one is the Ravad. Ravad, on his disputing Maimonides in the laws of Kriyat Shema, the morning prayers, he writes the following, that we see in this certain case which is connected to prayers, Kriyat Shema, prayer, we see that the Rambam, as in many instances, decided to give his law according to the opinion of the Jerusalem Talmud. The Vilna Gaon, Rabbi Eliyahu from Vilna, he tells us in the Code of Jewish Law, Orach Chaim 546, chapter that is, and Law 5, we see in that case that, here's the words of the Gra, that Maimonides, as he usually does, relies on the words of the Jerusalem Talmud and the words of the sages that were compiled in Eretz Yisrael over the work of the Babylonian Talmud. So it's very clear here that Maimonides decided to go on the line of the Talmud of Eretz Yisrael, of the land of Israel, which looked in a positive light at the dealings of the Bar Kokhba period of time. Okay, our next tackle is that there are inner contradictions between Maimonides. We brought 7 different sources, and sometimes Maimonides brings down that this is a miraculous period of time. Sometimes he brings down that this is a natural period of time. So once again, we don't have to get too nervous about it. Just calm down, take a seat, pull up a glass of fresh water, and here we go. We're going to bring down now, with God's help, 3 sources that show that there is no discrepancy between Maimonides. The Messianic age is a process. And when Maimonides speaks about a natural process, he's talking about the beginning stages. When he speaks about a supernatural, wondrous period of time, miraculous time, he's talking about advanced stages. How does this play out? Much of it depends on the Jewish people. Depending on our spiritual and ethical level, at the time. We could perhaps speed up the process, we could perhaps skip various stages of the process, but if worse comes to worse, there is a process here, and different stages. They will begin on a low burning fire, and they will pick up as time rolls. So number one, we have our book, first source. It's called From Exile to Redemption by Rabbi Alter Friedman, page 258. Here's what he writes. He brings down various sources of Maimonides. He shows the contradiction as we did at the beginning of our class. And here's what he says. No sweat, no problem. The beginning stages of the Messiah will be a natural process. That's why Rabbi Akiva and the leading sages of their generation, they believed that Bar Kokhba was the Messiah, because he was doing things that are the beginning process. What does that mean, the beginning process? He was bringing the Jewish people back to the land of Israel. He was conquering the Gentiles. He was conquering the land of Israel. The land of Israel became independent, a sovereign state for 4 years. So this is the beginning stages of the redemption and the Messianic era. Afterwards, when Maimonides brings down need for supernatural wondrous acts, this is a later stage of the game. Number two, in the former chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Shlomo Goren, who was the chief rabbi first of the army in 1967 in the Six-Day War, he has a book, it's called The Laws of the Holidays. In two places, he writes the same idea here, on pages 548 and page 549. So, take it from the beginning. Rabbi Goren says the following, 548. He says we have to understand, he brings down various contradicting sources within Maimonides. You have to understand that there are different stages. At the beginning, there will be a stage of setting up first he will conquer the land of Israel. Afterwards he will establish a governing body in the land of Israel. There will be independence. Afterwards he will build the temple. Afterwards he will ingather the Jewish people. There will be a process of the ingathering of the exiles of the Jewish people for all the world. As the process goes on, there will be less need for natural means, and things will become much more supernatural. So this is written in two places in the book of Rabbi Goren. Okay, next question is there a need for the Messiah to be from the family of King David, the lineage of King David? So we know that King David is from the tribe of Judah. However, within Judah, there are two offshoots of the family. Judah had two children, two sons. One was named Zerach and the other Peretz. From the Peretz lineage comes the David dynasty of Messiah, and the other from the side of the offshoot of Zerach, that's not. So, question is, was Bar Kokhba, was he from that lineage? Why did they think that he was the Messiah? Did they check it out? Did somebody check out who he was? Did they give him a background check? So let's look. First source is the famous author of the commentary on the Torah, Tzror Hamor, written by Rabbi Avram Saba, who was one of the Jews that in 1492 was expelled from Spain. He has another book. It's a question and answer book called Ketz Hayamin. There, astonishingly, he said that he did research, and Bar Kokhba was from the lineage of King David. Pretty wild. Possibly the same idea, not necessarily, is from a different book, Seder HaDorot, which goes from the beginning of creation throughout Jewish history. It goes, and it writes that Bar Kokhba was from the tribe of Judah, which is a good start. However, as we said, there's two different tracks, and one is not, so that's not clear. Our third source is in a book, Har HaMelech. It was on page 406. An amazing idea here. He brings down the question. Somebody asked the author of Har HaMelech, is there a need that the king, Messiah, will be from the lineage of King David? So here's what he says. It could be, on one hand, that Rabbi Akiva was not interested. He never checked it out. He was not interested. Because it doesn't matter. Even though he might not be in the lineage of the King David dynasty, he was definitely a representative of the Messiah, of the son of Joseph. As we mentioned, Joseph representing the physical buildup of the land of Israel, the material side, the economical side, the army side, the war, the military side of the land of Israel, of the return of the Jewish people. So therefore, it could be that Rabbi Akiva never even bothered to check, because he saw all the signs. It was clear to Rabbi Akiva that Bar Kokhba had definite signs of being at least a Messiah on the level of the son of Joseph, who's here to restore government and sovereignty and independence to the Jewish people. And therefore, that is his answer. Okay, so we have, it was possible that Bar Kokhba was from the dynasty of King David. It's possible, it's a question mark, and it doesn't really matter, because Rabbi Akiva saw him as the beginning process of the Messianic era, which is the Messiah of the son of Joseph. Okay. Now, God willing, in our next class, we will discuss a very, very important issue. I'm just going to throw it out right now, and then we'll leave you in suspense. Don't touch that dial. Rambam, Maimonides, in 3 places, he speaks about the Messiah period, or the Messiah himself. He speaks about in terms of military. He speaks about fighting wars. He speaks about victories in these wars. He speaks about independence. He speaks about bringing Jews back to Israel. Our question is, why is it? And this is fundamental. If you understand this point, you understand everything. Why is it a prelude that in order to bring upon the final redemption, there is always a need for this military battles, wars being fought, the land of Israel being resurrected, coming to life again? Why is there a need for this militaristic side? Why did Rabbi Akiva say, when he saw what Bar Kokhba was doing, when he saw that he was ruthless, when he saw that he was taking vengeance against the nations of the world, when he saw that he was being victorious in wars, when he saw what a warrior he was, he said, this is the Messiah. Why in the world, why is this a prerequisite for the period of Messiah? That's a big question. It was that way 2,000 years ago, and we see today very similar what's going on with the IDF being one of the most powerful armies in the world, definitely in the Middle East, but also in the world. Why is there a need for a military, for war, for battles, in order for us to bring on the era of the redemption, where Rabbi Akiva understood this necessity? So stay tuned.